Whether because of cost, convenience, or lifestyle, a growing demographic of young families in Ontario's capital city now considers condominiums among their real estate options. And many more perhaps would join them, but for the lack of larger family-size units in condo towers, which are often comprised mostly of one-bedroom units. What would it take to make that a more plentiful option? Let's ask. Cherise Berta, she's Executive Director of the Ryerson City Building Institute. Anne-Marie Nasser, Manager, Strategic Initiatives at the City of Toronto's Planning Division. And Steve Daniels, Vice President of Development Planning with Tridel. That's a major real estate developer based here in Toronto, and we are delighted to welcome you back to this place, and you two, I think, for the first time here. Nice to have you all here for a discussion about whether or not families can, if they want to, actually live in condos in this city and others. And let's start just by putting this information up, shall we, Sheldon? Just to set the table. Millennials, between 2016 and 2026, the 35 to 44 age bracket is expected to grow by more than 200,000 residents, driving increased demand for larger, more family-friendly housing. And if we look at seniors, downsizing seniors, that's age 65 plus, will continue to grow rapidly, almost 500,000 residents. In many cases, they will be looking for similar housing options as young families. So we've got this sort of at both ends of the demographic spectrum, all looking for a kind of housing that we may not have enough of right now. Anne-Marie, let me start with you. Why are young families, in your view, choosing to forgo a house and raise their kids in multi-residential buildings these days?
Well, I think we found through our study, growing up, planning for children in new vertical communities, is that families, people who are living in the centers and downtown are actually really enjoying it. And they really don't want to make that shift in lifestyle change in terms of moving elsewhere. And so they want the convenience, they want the accessibility, and they want the ability to raise families in these new vertical communities. The challenge that they're having is that the new vertical communities, the way they're currently being designed, are not really accommodating their needs. And that's what we heard a lot about through our study process.
That's where I go to Cherise. Do we have the supply to serve these two differing demographics that seem to want the same kind of product?
Well, no, we looked at the data, and thank you for referencing our report in the opening, but we looked at not what's being built, but what's actually on its way into our city and into our entire region. So we looked at what's in the pipeline, what we're going to see in the next 5 years in the Greater Toronto area, and we're finding a complete mismatch with where shifting demographics are going and what we're actually building. So I'll give you some examples. Sure. We're mainly building one bedrooms, but we're still building one bedrooms, and that coming online in the next 5 years, only 40% of condo units are going to be 2 bedrooms or more. You compare that to the 1990s, when that was about 67%. And the issue isn't just necessarily that we're building small, we're building tall. And over 3/4 of the units that we're building are in buildings that are over 20 stories. And that's for the whole GTA, and for the Central Toronto, over half are in buildings that are 36 stories and more.
You don't mind that part of it, do you? I mean, you like intensification,
a
right?
lot of people like intensification. A lot of people want to live in high buildings. But the issue is that we don't need entirely that level of intensification to be filling in our residential neighborhoods and to be creating opportunities for multi-unit buildings. So let's face it, we're not building any more single detached houses in our already established suburban and urban neighborhoods that are close to schools and transit and jobs.
So we've got to find something
else.
So
we've got to be building that missing middle housing, which is a little bit more family appropriate.
Okay, Mr. Daniels, now we take aim at you. How come you're not building what the market suggests is right on your horizon?
Well, I think I'd like to say that we have been, and we've been doing it since the 60s. It's a matter of right now there seems to be a change in market that's becoming, everyone's more aware of this with the studies that have been coming out. But we have been building larger units at Tridel. I can't really speak for the other developers out there, but I can tell you currently right now, we have a building in Etobicoke that the first 5 floors are all geared towards families. 3-bedroom, 2-bedroom units are further above. We're even putting in 1-bedroom units within the 3-bedroom units to address the potential mother and father that are looking to downsize, so that there's that convenience and that opportunity. It's about providing opportunities for them. Our buildings that have been selling out the quickest are the buildings that have had these family units. We have a revitalization project up at Toronto Community Housing at Leslie and Shepherd called Leslie Nymark, and all our large bedroom units up there sold out right away. Our site on DuPont called Bianca, same thing, 1,200 to 1,500 square feet. Those units all sold out very quickly.
I think one of the things that we found, to Steve's point, is that so in our guidelines, so the new guidelines are focusing both on the neighborhood, the building, and the unit. And when we prepared the guidelines, we went out and talked to families, and we also had a number of workshops with the design industry and developers, such as Tridel. And so the project that Steve just mentioned about the idea of clustering the larger units at the base of the building also addresses what Charisse mentioned in terms of saying that, you know, families like to be closer to grade. So the guidelines speak to the fact that if we cluster, then frankly it doesn't matter if it's a 26-story building, because if those family units are kind of in that mid-rise form in the first eight stories, then you basically have kind of a win-win scenario. I'm not saying that mid-rise is also not important. It absolutely is, and we're seeing a lot of it in our development pipeline. But I think what we're seeing is that families would like to be clustered. You create a community within the building, and you start looking at the building as a community and not a building. And I think that's what's happening, and I think that's what some of the developers are turning their minds to.
Well, that's what I wondered. Yeah, you're saying Tridel's one of the good guys, but maybe some of the other developers are not realizing this demographic change?
I think what we're seeing is a cultural shift, and I think and more developers are starting to turn their minds to that. I think that some developers focus more on the end user versus the investor market, and when you have an end user focused developer, you end up with a product that appeals to people like walking in the door, not making the call around the investment in the project, and I think that has a huge difference, and that was also reflected in the Ryerson City Building Institute report.
I would just add that we at Tridel see this as an opportunity, a market opportunity that addressing the family needs in the downtown is a good thing. I happen to work for a developer where the families that own the company live in the city. So we value that. We think there's a real opportunity there, and it's all about good city building at the end of the day.
As you look out there, what do you see as the consequences of there not being enough supply if more families in fact want to live in more urban areas? What'd you call them? Vertical communities?
Vertical communities.
Okay, that's a new one.
Well, I think we're just stuck in this pattern where people have to choose between driving till they qualify for a detached house in the fringes and dealing with a horrible 2-hour commute, or squishing their family into a 600 square foot condo.
People do that, eh?
And people are doing that. And it's not to say that others are not building those. I mean, in our analysis, there are those. It's not zero. It's a good start, but we need to be looking at what are the various policies, mechanisms, financing models that can turn that trend around, because what we're studying is what's coming down the pipe, and it's not enough for families. And I really value the growing up guidelines, which are really important for especially some of the high-rise that we're building. But we need other policies that are going to make it cost competitive for developers to build more lower mid-rise and stacked houses, and some of the buildings that are at a lower scale that can fit into our residential communities, like our yellow belt, like in our low-rise neighborhoods, which are really difficult because it's costly. You can talk more about how costly land is and hard it is to turn around a profit when you're dealing with a lower scale building.
You say different policies. From whom?
Well, I think there's a whole suite of things, but obviously looking at the financial model. So for example, we have record levels of condos coming down the pipeline right now, more than we've ever built before. And 95% of them are sold before the shovel hits the ground. And most of those are going to investors, at least 50%, probably more downtown.
Meaning people who have no plans to live there. Is that what you mean?
Maybe some, yeah, maybe some of them, but half of them are going to investors, and it's not foreign investors, it's investors that then turn it around. So this issue of building for end users is really important. How do we, because the financial model follows what works in the past.
Sure.
That's right, let's build what worked before, let's build what worked 5 years ago, and we need to be looking forward. And how do we change that financial model so that we're building units for end users?
May I quote your report? Sure, why not? Here's from the Ryerson City Building Institute, an Urban Nation. This is Bedrooms in the Sky. While two-bedroom condo apartments can offer affordability at a price point just over half that of a detached house in the GTA, resale data suggests that larger three-bedroom condos remain cost prohibitive to many buyers, averaging $918,000. Okay, what's going to help families? I mean, that's clearly beyond the reach of...
It's higher, actually, than an average semi-detached.
No kidding.
Yeah.
All right. So what's going to help families who are priced out of a situation like that?
Well, in terms of what the study did around planning for vertical communities, we looked at basically creating a stock so that basically is a family-friendly in terms of design and the contributions. And we don't, as Charisse mentioned, we don't have that stock right now as much as we want. We are starting to get it. We're starting to see that stock turn around. We're seeing 8% in the downtown of 3 beds and 8% in the Shepherd Corridor. Why? Because there's councillors that are actively pursuing the need for more 2s and 3-bedroom units. So that's important, and we're starting to put it in planning policy to actually require at least 25% of those units to be larger units. Then there's the lens of affordability, and that's a piece of work that is ongoing and probably one of the city's, public policy priorities. And what we're seeing with the affordability piece is we're seeing the provincial government considering something called inclusionary zoning. And that's still being discussed in order for it to basically be layered on to the stock piece. But what we focused on is the stock piece. And until that legislation lands, I really, it'll depend how that comes forward.
Give us the 20-second definition of inclusionary zoning.
Inclusionary zoning is basically requiring, allowing municipalities to require developers to provide a certain percentage of units within each building as affordable units.
Gotcha. Steve, you saw the situation there, you saw the number there. What are the options for families for whom almost $1 million is still not an option?
Well, I think at the end of the day, you're looking at very current $700 a square foot is on average. At $700 a square foot times 1,200, that's $840,000 for a 3-bedroom unit. The condo market is where the affordability is if you're doing a comparison between the single-family house and condos. And I think there's a generation gap. I think the older generation had the white picket fence, single-family house. That was the dream. I think that has changed to we're building up. And we're being, I think, more responsible with intensification near transportation hubs. My generation wants to live downtown. It's a trade-off from a backyard to being able to go to the AGO or to the ROM,
right,
or to be able to walk. And I think there's a real shift right now, and it's really up to us as partners with the city and the development industry to meet that market demand and address it.
Let me pick up on what Charisse said a moment ago about a change in policy from presumably municipal and or the provincial government, which would encourage you to build more of whatever's needed. Do you need that?
Well, it's supply and demand. There really isn't enough supply right now, and I think part of the challenge is really at the provincial level that they need to open up land to allow for more single-family homes to be built. We're not looking, I'm not trying to promote urban sprawl, but there really is a demand right now, and the demand is being pushing the condo market for meeting that.
So what land do you think needs opening up?
I would say in the suburbs, just outside the GTA.
Greenbelt?
I think there's some areas in the Greenbelt that this could occur.
Okay, Charisse, go for it.
Well, I would say a couple things come to mind with the rally cry for supply. It's been, we need more supply in order to deal with affordability. Couple issues to unpack there. The first one, I think there's this mythology that we're bumping against the Greenbelt and we're not building any more single-family homes, and we are. There are decades of land available to build single-family homes.
Within the 416?
With it, no, not in the 416.
Okay.
We can't, there's no place to put these single-family homes in the 416, but on the fringes of where our already urbanized footprint is.
Without having to go into the Greenbelt.
We can go into the green fields, which are allocated for municipalities to continue to build single-family homes. That exists. They can build homes for the next couple of decades. But the question is that what we want to be focusing our energy on? That's going to require longer commutes. It's going to create more congestion. It's going to create economic costs of congestion. And we also need to look at, even though that land's available, do we want to be consuming it quickly just within our generation? Do we need to look at preserving it for other values, whether it's agricultural, climate change? But all that to say, those homes are available, they're being built, people can still drive to qualify for those homes and drive further and further afield. What we need to be focusing on is building the right supply in our more proximate neighborhoods that are close to our jobs and transit and schools and services.
And the right supply means what?
We need to be looking at the family-friendly piece of that. And the problem is that family-friendly piece needs to get built. And we're lacking that supply. So again, to be saying, let's just build supply. And I know that there's a bit of a focus right now on streamlining the approval process so we get more supply in the pipeline. If we don't build the right supply and we're building more of the smaller units, that's not going to help us.
Right. Our development pipeline is a very active pipeline. We have over 360,000 units in that pipeline. Within the past year, there's been an additional 50,000 added to it. So we feel that the pipeline is very active in Toronto.
Even with family-friendly stuff?
Well, right now, that's what we're informing. We're informing through this study the family-friendly, and we're working with developers the guidelines have just basically been approved by council last spring. They're coming, they're basically some of the policy initiatives that we're putting forward, requiring 25% of 2 and 3 bedrooms at a size. So we don't just require, because in the past we required the 2 and 3 bedrooms, but they were tiny little units, as Charisse mentioned. And now we're getting actually appropriate size. And what we looked at in terms of informing that size is we just didn't sit in a room. We went out and talked to families. And we went out and we did a condo hack. And it was fantastic because, everybody's busy, families in particular with younger children. And so we went in to see how families are using their condominiums and what they were looking for in their condominiums.
Do they make it work in small spaces?
They actually, the first thing that they do is we thought that we would see some almost unique kind of MacGyver type condo hacks. And really what we saw was the first thing that they told us in no uncertain terms was, we're hacking our priorities. We are downsizing what we feel are priorities.
Should we put this picture up now? I mean, this is a great picture.
See that? Yes.
There we go.
That's our infamous picture. We're going to put T-shirts out on that. And it's interesting. So we had a survey, and we asked people about.
You should just describe what this is.
Oh, so this is. So when we did the condo hacks, we went into the condominiums, and families showed us how they live. And one of the things, the famous stroller in the bathtub, is their parking space for the stroller. When we did a survey of families across the city, what they said is that when they talk about their primary transit mode, they talked about the stroller over even public transit as a transit mode. And when you think about it, when you go into some of the buildings, it's hard to get the stroller in between the first door and the second door to even buzz in or get into the building. To get into the elevator it occupies, and then you can finally get into your unit. You can really only go single file into the unit, and then you have to figure out someplace to park. So innovative families put them in the bathtub. So our guidelines are speaking to the fact that what we call the landing and the launch pad of a family, being the entryway, should be bigger. That basically we should have good-sized bedrooms, because it's not just about the children when they're under 4 years old. You also want to make sure that you retain families. And so you have to have a bedroom where it can be a young person's place.
Let me get Steve on that. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I would add, we worked with the city on developing the guidelines, and it's a good thing. At the end of the day, it's about the guiding principle from my perspective, it's barrier-free. If you're able to have something that allows the stroller to allow the little extra space for people to get in and out of, the conveniences of taking the space above the washer and dryer to provide more storage, to take what would typically be in a single-family backyard and put it on the common outdoor amenity space that allows for the area to barbecue, but to be able to have the kids play in a kid-friendly area, to allow the mother or father to be able to work out, and on the other side of the glass is a playroom area for the kids to actually sit there. To have another space that deals with the tweens or the teens and allow them to go and get out of the unit to go down and have a study room. We're actually providing pods for them to focus like we typically back in the day at a library, at university, to go and focus. And so that's what we're doing. We recognize it and working with the city's guidelines and see opportunities there to address these. And it's taking and looking at, you know, we're all parents at some point in their lives or kids, and understanding those conveniences. Again, storage, we can all find more storage space. It's a matter of having an eye to it with the design, with the architect, and putting pen to paper and making it happen.
Charisse, does this though require a pretty significant shift in our thinking and our culture, in as much as, you know, there's still a huge demographic in this province that thinks that if you're going to have a family, you got to have a white picket fence and, you know, a garage for 2 cars and the whole 9 yards. We need to rethink of this, don't we, if we're going to make this work going forward 10, 20, 25 years?
Yeah, I think, I mean, something that our data showed is what is coming out in 5 years, and it's really great to hear that now the city and hopefully the province is responding to this and saying, what do we need to do, and having the guidelines to ensure that trend shifts around. But I think one of those cultural rethinks really plays out in neighborhoods, in the ground level. Like we talk about fitting families into condos, we need to fit condos into neighborhoods. And I'm thinking some of those established neighborhoods that don't want density at all costs.
Name names.
Just, you know, some of those neighborhoods that are mostly single family homes. And there's a bit of fear attached to what happens when you bring in density. And I think that in order to deal with that culture shift, it's working more closely with the community in the way that you guys do and some other developers. And one of the things I always say is people are so focused in these community meetings or in opposition, they just want to talk about density and they want to talk about height. What they need to be talking about is what's happening at the ground level. Like, what do we get? Are we going to get a playroom? Are we going to get something to wash our dog in? Like, what are we going to get in exchange? What type of retail do we want? Do we want a little grocery store? How do we want our streetscape and our sidewalks to be animated? Benches, things like that. There's an opportunity for the community to benefit from this development. And you know, that needs to be built into the planning process so that from the get-go, they're talking about the positives.
Do you find that neighborhood groups are sort of stuck in the same old debates about too much height or too much density and not creatively looking at it the way Charisse just described?
Well, the work that my team does in the city is that we're looking at a number of major studies across the city and sort of changing the city, whether it's the downtown or Young Eglinton or Don Mills Crossing or Victoria Park and Shepherd. And in those communities, and Keele and Finch, in those communities, there is an appetite for, in terms of looking at intensification and wanting a range of housing, right? There's not necessarily a diversity across the board in terms of tall. People want mid-rise. People want to see some low-rise
Can you put numbers on this? What's low-rise, what's mid-rise, what's high-rise?
Low-rise tends to be up to 4 stories. Mid-rise tends to be between 6 to 8 stories, and then high-rise is above that.
Go for it. Yeah.
And in the, and then in the downtown and Young Eglinton, we're seeing a huge amount above, 30, 40 stories.
I think we've got 250s across the road
from
here.
Downtown is going to double. We have projections in that downtown's doubling in population. Young Eglinton will be doubling in its population. We're seeing the Eglinton Crosstown coming in and intensification happening there. We're having great conversations with communities around Golden Mile and the idea of transforming that area there.
That's Scarborough, east of here.
Yeah, that's between basically Victoria Park and Scarborough, yeah. And then further along Eglinton. And it's just you know, what we're seeing is that there is definitely the interest there, and you know, sometimes the conversations are different if people haven't had the experience of working and seeing development and change. But we have, I think, really good consultation processes.
Well, let me find out about that.
The developers are actually really a great partner with us in terms of having those conversations.
I want to find out more about that. Okay, do you think, you know, I covered City Hall 35 years ago, okay? I was one of those reporters who used to be down there, and there were great fights between the city and developers. I don't know if there still are, but there were great fights about who wanted to build what and so on. And are you still having to fight with City Hall to get built what you want to get built versus to get built what they want you to build?
We have our challenges at the end of the day.
Is that a nice way of saying yes?
We have our challenges, Steve.
Right.
And our approach is always to work with city staff and come up with solutions to that. It's, you know, it's like taking a circle and a square and making them fit. You've got to give and take to make it come together. And I think at the end of the day, as much as there's challenges that we have to try and get our approvals, it's a process that we have to go through. And I think some of those challenges is really with the community is a generational divide, as I see it. There's a large retired population that's out there that seems to have a lot of time to go to these meetings. And then there's the working class, the millennials, if you want to call it, Generation X's, that can't always get to those meetings at that particular moment to voice, yes, we actually do want something. And I think that's been well publicized in the media, that there's a bit of a shift in the downtown, that people of a certain generation are looking for, yes, we want intensification in the downtown.
If Cherise were going to build these kinds of family-friendly condominiums, doesn't that also suggest that we're going to need schools, we're going to need parks, we're going to need community centers around all of these things? And, you know, is that in the pipeline as well?
Well, I think that obviously follows at some point, but we can be proactive with that. And I would say there's lots of opportunities to leverage public assets to create complete communities. So for example, let's look at GO stations.
Okay.
We're investing $16 billion into upgrading our GO network to regional express rail. Huge amount of investment. Those are parking lots. We could be transforming those into complete communities with lots of different types of residential buildings to serve different family budgets, family sizes, rental ownership. If it makes sense, employment as well, retail, things like that, services, schools, what have you, integrate into the rest of the neighborhood, you know, integrate cycling, things like that. But in order to do this, I think it creates a huge opportunity with the public land owned by the province. You bring to the table the land, the transit line, partner with a developer or a number of developers. And rather than just a one-time development charge, share in the profits. Use that money to reinvest in affordable housing and transit. No,
we don't do that.
We're not doing that right now.
We need to do a better job.
And another thing is that then you have a say in what gets built there. You're not sitting and waiting to see what's coming down the pipeline. You know what you need to build, and you're proactive for that, and you have a better share of revenues.
You want the city for a partner?
Absolutely.
You do, eh?
Absolutely.
You don't want them to mind their own damn business and you run your business?
No, I think we have to do this together if we're going to have a city that I want to live in, and it's going to work and come together. You know, we're doing work right now with Toronto Community Housing at Alexander Park, Leslie Nymark, and we see this as, you know, we're doing the right thing. It's taking those areas of the city and you know, reinvesting in them, and introducing market condos where we're coming into the community. We're not part of the community yet, but we're becoming part of that community, and it's a good thing.
It's one of the things in terms of a net benefit to the community. So when you're looking at intensification, you want to make sure that the infrastructure, particularly the community infrastructure, is basically aligned with growth. And that's one of the big pieces that people felt, that there's been too much growth without the infrastructure, whether that's parks or community facilities or childcare or schools. So what we're trying to do is we have to make sure that we strike a balance, because that's when we actually have a livable community, that's when we have a complete community. So when we're doing sort of more of our sort of starting from new types of developments at Don Mills and Eglinton, when we do master plan communities, we tend to be able to make sure that that alignment happens. When we're in an infill context, it's a bit more complicated. When you're making sure that childcare's come online in Young Eglinton or in the downtown and schools. But what we are seeing, I mean, right now we have two new childcares that are going to be integrated in the base of residential buildings in the Young Eglinton area. We've worked with our development partners in the downtown, even looking at schools integrated at the base of condominium buildings and other childcares and schools.
We have 2 daycares out in Scarborough in our Metrogate project.
Yeah.
You know, it helps sell the product at the end of the day. If you don't have the schools, if you don't have the daycares, if you don't have what supports the community in place, it's difficult to sell a product. And I think it's important, going back to your point, as a partnership with the city, if we don't have those key components and programming of that space correct, it makes it difficult for us at the end of the day to sell a product. And if we can sell a product and everything is in place the way it should be, it's good for everyone.
I'm delighted we've solved this entire problem in the last 30 minutes. Well done, TVO. Can I thank Anne-Marie Nasser from the City of Toronto, and Cherise Berta from the Ryerson City Building Institute, and Steve Daniels from Tridel for being on our program this evening. Thanks so much, everybody.
Thank you.
The Agenda with Steve Paikin is brought to you by the Chartered Professional Accountants of Ontario, helping businesses stay on the right side of change with strategic thinking, insightful decisions, and business leadership. Are you on the right side of change? Ask an Ontario CPA.